Night had settled over the capital like a heavy bruise when the world's greatest misunderstanding unfolded not on a battlefield, not beneath the glare of satellites, but in the quiet space where trust sleeps. Everyone believed President Ibrahim Traoré would one day fall to an invading force or a precision strike, but no one imagined the deadliest threat would come from fingers that had clasped his in brotherhood 1,000 times. And at 3 a.m., as rain battered the presidential windows like 1,000 warnings, Ibrahim lay half awake on a plain cat, uniform folded neatly, boots still laced, eyes burning from 30 sleepless hours of leading a country held together by grit. Yet even through exhaustion, the old soldier's instincts coiled alive inside him. Meanwhile, in the corridor, the supposed fortress of African security, stood Lieutenant Caleb, the man who had once carried Ibrahim through the mud during training, the man who had starved beside him in the bush, the man Ibrahim would have trusted with the keys to his soul. Yet tonight Caleb was not guarding the door but watching the seconds bleed from his wristwatch as the hallway cameras silently looped on a 10-minute ghost cycle, a technical glitch the palace staff would later swear they still didn't understand. Caleb whispered sector clear into his earpiece, not to Palace HQ but to a shadow crew parked 2 miles away in a nameless van, then slid a stolen master keycard into the lock, the green light blooming without a beep, disguised by the pounding storm. He slipped inside like a cold draft, drawing not a rifle but a small suppressed pistol meant for clean endings. The script already dictated by foreign hands, 2 to the chest, 1 to the skull, and a staged tragedy polished enough to fool a nation. He stepped closer to the cot where Traoré lay with his back turned, rising and falling in slow steady breaths, unaware or perhaps waiting. Caleb lifted the gun, breath steady, nerves quiet, ready to kill the man who once called him brother, ready to earn the blood money wired to accounts far from Africa. And as the muzzle aligned with the center of Traoré's exposed back, the storm outside roared like an omen, announcing that this was the real beginning of the story. Here is a copyright-safe long AVD, totally transformed, engaging, single-paragraph rewrite with corrected spelling for Traoré. Everywhere, lightning tore across the sky like a blade of white fire as Caleb whispered, "Sorry, brother. Everyone breaks for the right price." Tightening his finger around the trigger mere milliseconds from rewriting the nation's future when the sudden flash illuminated something wrong, terribly wrong. The sleeping shape on the cot wasn't breathing, 'twasn't shifting, wasn't alive at all, and before Caleb could process the unease crawling up his spine, a cold, unmistakable click-clack growled from behind him. A voice he knew better than his own thoughts rolled through the dark. "You're holding that gun wrong, Caleb." He spun so violently he nearly tripped, firing a panicked shot that thudded harmlessly into the wall as the truth snapped into focus. The figure in bed was nothing but stacked pillows and a wool blanket. A damn decoy, and from the corner emerged Ibrahim Traoré himself, seated in a leather chair like a man watching a storm he already predicted, pistol steady, eyes filled not with fear but with a betrayal that cut deeper than any bullet. "I trained you better," he said quietly. "You checked the corners but forgot the shadows." And Caleb's hands began trembling because without the element of surprise, he wasn't facing a president, he was facing the hardened commando, who had crawled through hell long before politics ever found him. "Drop it," Traoré warned. "Don't make me repaint this room with my brother's blood." But panic twisted Caleb's mind, pushing him to raise the gun again with a broken scream. "It's too late. I can't stop it." And that was his final mistake. Because Traoré didn't rise, he detonated from the chair, covering the distance in 2 brutal strides, striking Caleb's wrist with a snap that sent the pistol skidding across the floor, then driving a knee into his gut before slamming him into the wall so hard the portraits trembled. "Who bought you?" he thundered, forearm crushing Caleb's throat like a metal bar. "Was it the French? The Americans? Did you trade your soul for a fast car and a suitcase of pretty promises?" Caleb's face purpled as he fought for breath, tears mixing with sweat, choking out, It wasn't money. They have the codes, Traoré. They know the shifts. They know everything." And only then did Traoré loosen his grip, not out of mercy, but because he realized the betrayal clawing at his throat was far bigger than the man gasping in his hands. "Here is your copyright-safe long AV, totally transformed, engaging, single-paragraph rewrite with all spellings corrected to Traoré." Ibrahim Traoré stared deep into Caleb's eyes, hunting for deception, but found nothing except raw terror, proof that the man trembling before him was never the architect, only the expendable pawn shoved forward on the chessboard of someone else's war. "You think killing me saves you?" Traoré growled, but Caleb slid helplessly down the wall, whispering, "No, but they said if I didn't do it quiet, they'd do it loud. They're not just coming for you, boss. They're coming to burn the whole palace down." And before the weight of those words settled, a burst of cold static slashed the room's silence as the fallen earpiece on the floor crackled to life. "Echo 1, report. Is the target neutralized? We are at the breach point. You have 30 seconds or we enter with heavy fire." The voice hissed, and Traoré realized the assassins weren't marching, they were already at the door, expecting a dead president to greet them. He lifted the earpiece, looked at Caleb with a chilling steadiness, and commanded, "Get up. Since you wanted to be part of their plan, you're going to finish it." pressing the device to Caleb's trembling lips with a cold finality, whispering, "Answer them. One wrong word, and I don't need a bullet to end. You tell them I'm down." And Caleb, throat dry as dust, swallowed and pressed the button, forcing his voice into the shape of a killer. This is Caleb. Target is down, room secured, no resistance." Then silence stretched like a blade between them while Traoré hovered a thumb over his pistol's safety, waiting to see if they detected the fear leaking from Caleb's voice until finally the reply came. "Copied that. Atco 1, good work. Extraction team moving in to sanitize the scene. 8 or 2 minutes, don't move." And with that single cold confirmation, Traoré understood the real fight hadn't even begun yet. The line snapped off into silence, and Ibrahim Traoré finally released his hold, letting Caleb collapse against the desk, shaking so hard it looked like his bones might rattle out of his skin. "They're coming, boss. You don't understand, these guys are professionals, mercenaries, ghosts. They don't leave witnesses." Caleb gasped, but Traoré simply replied, "Neither do I," with the icy calm of a man who had survived worse than hired killers. And he crossed the room to press a hidden latch behind an ornate wooden panel that instantly swung open to reveal a secret armory. Flashbangs, armor plates, the tools of a man who had prepared for betrayal long before tonight. Tossing a heavy vest to Caleb, "Put it on," he ordered. And when Caleb blinked up in confusion, You're not killing me." Traoré loaded an AK with effortless precision and said, "Not yet. Right now, you're bait. Survive 10 minutes, maybe you keep breathing," before tapping his triggering a silent alert that bypassed the compromised palace security and reached only the hand-picked elites sleeping in the basement, the Black Cobras, his personal fangs in the dark. Moments later, a concealed service door slid open and Sergeant Moses, towering, scarred, and loyal as bone, entered, read the room with a single glance, and waited. "Status," Traoré whispered, killing the lights until the entire office drowned in absolute black, leaving only the hum of tension. 6 to 8 tangos in the corridor. "They think I'm dead and that Caleb here is ready to hi-fi them," he murmured, positioning Caleb in a chair facing the door, forcing him down with a hand on the shoulder. "Sit still. Smile when they enter. If you move or scream, you die." As he and Moses melted into opposite corners of the room, invisible and silent, turning the space into a predator's nest, heavy footsteps pounded toward them, unhurried, arrogant. Why sneak when you believe the kill is already done? And the double doors groaned open as a silhouette stepped in, scanning the darkness through night vision goggles, spotting only Caleb in the chair, and lowering his rifle with a smirk. He stepped fully inside without checking the shadows, muttering, "Easy money," unaware that in Burkina Faso there is no such thing as easy. Not when a lion like Traoré is awake, and in the next heartbeat, Moses erupted from the darkness like a panther unleashed. Moses seized the rifle's barrel and wrenched it skyward just as the mercenary squeezed the trigger. A violent blast tore into the ceiling, showering plaster like a blizzard and blowing the element of surprise straight to hell. But chaos only sharpened Ibrahim Traoré, while Moses grappled the first intruder in a storm of fists and steel. 2 more silhouettes stormed the doorway and leveled their weapons at Caleb, yet Traoré was already sliding across the polished floor like a shadow on rails, firing 2 cold, surgical shots. Pop, and the first man collapsed while the second spun in terror, never even getting his gun up before Traoré crushed his jaw with a brutal pistol butt strike that dropped him cold, leaving the room silent again in under 10 seconds, except for the rasp of Moses' breathing and the stunned ringing in Caleb's ears as 3 elite killers lay broken on the carpet, victims of their own arrogance. Traoré stood, straightened his uniform, not the image of a politician who survived death but a battle-forged soldier who had just cleared an enemy bunker, and he strode to the lead mercenary pinned under Moses' massive boot. "Search him," he ordered, and Moses tore open the tactical vest to reveal no tags, no insignia, just thick stacks of US dollars and a sleek satellite phone that suddenly buzzed to life, glowing cold blue in the dark. "Boss, don't answer it," Caleb stammered. "They'll track it, they'll send a drone." But Traoré ignored him, staring at the vibrating device like it was a beating heart in his palm. If he didn't answer, they'd know the mission failed. If he did, he was stepping into open war. So he pressed green and lifted it to his ears, saying nothing. A smooth, educated, air-conditioned voice, one that orders death with manicured fingers, spoke first. "Report. Is Traoré dead? Did you secure the laptop?" And a cold dread knifed through Ibrahim's chest, because he knew that voice, knew it from the polite laughter, the warm handshake, the shared tea at last week's diplomatic summit. And in that instant, he realized his enemy wasn't just in the palace. His enemy had been sitting at his table. Ibrahim Traoré finally spoke into the sat, his voice dropping into a tone so cold it felt carved from the underside of a grave. "Your men are sleeping and I'm very, very awake," he growled, and the gasp on the other end told him the architect had not expected to hear the voice of a living president before the line instantly cut. Traoré crushed the phone in his fist and turned to Moses with a glare that could start a war. "The problem isn't at the gates, Mo. The problem is sitting inside our capital," and Moses chambered his rifle, asking if they should lock down the palace. But Traoré stepped over the unconscious mercenaries like discarded trash and said, "Lockdowns are for victims. We hunt, then snapped his gaze to Caleb, who was wobbling to his feet like a man waking up in hell. Grab a weapon. You owe me a life. Tonight we're visiting an old friend. But before they could take 2 steps, the palace sirens erupted in a scream that turned the hallway blood red as emergency lights flooded the walls. The architect hadn't simply hung up, he had triggered Plan B. And the entire building shuddered as if struck by an earthquake. Moses yelled bomb as he shielded Traore. But Ibrahim sprinted to the window and saw the truth. The palace gates weren't exploding from inside. They were being obliterated by an armored truck smashing through the barricades, followed by a convoy of black SUVs spilling armed men onto the grounds like a swarm of metal locusts. The assassination attempt was over. The coup had officially begun, and the voice on that phone, a man Traoré had shared tea and polite smiles with just days ago, had unleashed an army on the presidential lawn. Bullets ripped the sandstone walls, shattering windows into storms of razor diamonds as Moses shouted, "Sir," but Traoré slammed a fresh magazine into his pistol and shook his head with a calm that defied the chaos outside. "Panic rooms are for rats, Moses, where lions don't hide in holes," he said, turning toward Caleb, who stood pale and trembling, gripping his rifle like it was a venomous snake. "Caleb, the West Wing service elevator still active." And Caleb blinked, confused and terrified, stuttering, The service elevator. Boss, that only goes down to the kitchen basement. Jism core idea. Same high MAGA wording, pacing, framing Sab Kuchnaya high. The hallway seemed to tighten around them like a fist, and Caleb's voice cracked as he whispered that they'd cornered themselves. But Ibrahim only let out a low, razor-thin grin asterisk. "A trap isn't a trap if you choose to spring it." With a silent nod they broke into a sprint, boots hammering over marble floors and past dust-covered portraits of leaders who had abandoned their posts long before the first shot was ever fired. Ibrahim didn't spare them a glance. He wasn't fleeing, he was hunting for higher ground. But when they swung round the next bend, the fight found them first. 3 mercenaries in matte black gear, faces masked, rifles already rising. Moses' warning roar shook the corridor a heartbeat before the world detonated in muzzle flashes, ricochets screaming off gold-trimmed walls. Heat grazed Ibrahim's cheek as he dropped, rolled, and punched 2 sharp bursts into the squad leader's visor. Moses answered with a furious wall of fire, and even Caleb's panic-driven sloppy shots forced the remaining 2 to duck. "Move," Ibrahim barked, herding them toward the service elevator, dead unlit, a metal tomb without power. Caleb nearly collapsed, insisting they were doomed. But Ibrahim's eyes had already locked onto the red fire extinguisher gleaming on the wall. "Moses," he said, and that was all it took. The big man swung it like a siege hammer, denting the steel doors until a groan ripped through the frame. With a snarl he wedged his fingers in and tore them open, just wide enough for the 3 of them to slip into the shaft as bullets sparked outside like fireworks. They slid down the cables into swallowing darkness, landing hard in a basement that felt ancient and abandoned, the air thick with cold concrete and machine grease. And then, beneath it all, something wrong. A rich, sharp cologne drifting through the dark, out of place, too deliberate. Ibrahim lifted a fist, demanding silence instantly, and motioned Moses back, because whatever was waiting down here already knew they were coming. Ibrahim drifted toward the boiler room like a shadow slipping between breaths, every footstep silent enough to disappear into the concrete. Through the narrow crack in the door, the truth slammed into him. Sitting casually on a wooden crate, surrounded by 4 elite guards, was a man in a flawless gray suit, calmly watching the live feed of the assault upstairs on a tablet, smiling. It wasn't a foreign mastermind. It wasn't an outsider. It was General Dopp's own uncle, the man who had sworn on a Bible 2 months ago to defend the Constitution, the man who had practically raised him. But the oath, like everything else in this palace tonight, lay shattered. Dopp pressed his earpiece, voice cold enough to frost steel. "Flush them out. Burn the whole wing if you must. I want Traor's corpse before sunrise." Ibrahim stepped back into darkness, the betrayal carving deeper than any blade. Caleb caught the emptiness in his face and whispered, "But he raised you." Ibrahim's reply was, "Ice, he raised me, and now he plans to bury me." They had 5 enemies below, an army above, and no exits that didn't end in death. Still, Ibrahim held out his hand. "Your radio," he told Musa. When Musa gave it, Ibrahim didn't call for rescue. He hijacked the palace's PA system. The moment he pressed transmit, his voice thundered through every hallway, every courtyard, every vent, echoing straight into the boiler room where Dopp sat. The general froze. For the first time, fear flickered in his eyes. Ibrahim wasn't trying to escape the basement. He was turning it into a tomb. Dopp, sweating now, screamed for his men to find him, insisting it was a bluff. But Ibrahim was already aiming not at his uncle, but at the massive rusted pressure valve looming above his head. One breath, one shot. Crack, the valve detonated like a cannon. A roaring blast of superheated steam erupted into the room, a white, angry beast tearing through the guards, blinding them instantly, drowning the room in burning fog. They panicked, firing wildly at nothing, bullets sparking off pipes in useless bursts of noise. That was all Ibrahim needed. "Now," he bellowed, and Musa exploded through the doorway like an unleashed storm, smashing into the chaos with enough fury to crack the earth itself. Musa hit the first mercenary so hard the man's helmet cracked against the concrete before he even realized someone had entered the room, and in the billowing cloud of steam, Ibrahim drifted forward like a figure carved out of smoke itself. He didn't sprint. He glided, every movement sharp, quiet, lethal. The second guard barely had time to register a shadow before Ibrahim's palm slammed into his throat, stealing his breath and his balance in a single motion, and the third went down as Ibrahim swept his legs clean out from under him, sending his weapon skidding across the scorched floor. 10 seconds. That was all it took for the elite squad to become a pile of groaning bodies clinging to consciousness. General Dopp staggered backward, coughing violently, waving his gleaming pistol in erratic, terrified arcs as the steam curled around him. "Stay back," he choked. "I swear, I'll do it. I'll kill you." And then Ibrahim emerged from the mist, his uniform streaked with soot, his face carved from pure calm, walking toward the raised gun as if it were nothing more than a pointing finger. He stepped right up to the barrel close enough that the metal touched his chest and didn't blink, didn't breathe, didn't even tense. Instead, he reached out with steady fingers and lowered the weapon with the gentleness of a man adjusting a crooked picture frame. "You can't kill me, uncle," Ibrahim said quietly, his voice heavier than the steam, "because you already died the moment you sold our people to men who don't even know your name." Dopp's strength collapsed all at once. The gun clattered to the floor and he sank after it, sobbing, shoulders shaking, muttering promises he had been fed, promises of peace, power, safety, lies, dressed as salvation. "They promised control," Dopp whimpered. "No," Ibrahim corrected flatly. "They promised chains." Musa secured the room while Caleb stood in the doorway, staring at the broken general like he was a ghost pulled from a nightmare. Caleb raised his rifle and looked to his president. "Do we end him, boss? One bullet. Clean, no loose ends." Ibrahim studied his uncle, this man who had betrayed blood, country, honor, and then shook his head. "No, a bullet is too quick, too kind. A bullet builds myths." He grabbed Dopp by the collar, yanked him upright, and dragged him through the steam, up the stairwells, past the portraits, past the wreckage, toward the rising dawn. "We're going outside," he said. "The people deserve to see the coward who hid in the dark." 10 minutes later, the heavy palace doors burst open. The courtyard was a sea of tanks, black SUVs, nervous soldiers, and coup mercenaries who had come expecting a victory announcement or a corpse, perhaps both. Instead, Ibrahim Traoré walked into the morning light, dragging General Dopp by his tie, like a disgraced criminal being delivered to judgment. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Some soldiers reached for their rifles, but their hands froze when they saw Ibrahim's expression gone blazing, unarmed, yet more dangerous than any weapon on the field. He dragged Dopp up the palace steps and tossed him down like discarded trash. Then Ibrahim stood tall, chest rising with steady breaths, and roared across the courtyard. Here is the man you were ready to follow. A man willing to sell your soil, trade, your children's future, and hand our country to foreigners for a penthouse in Paris." The words hit harder than gunfire, and for a moment, even the coup's army forgot how to breathe. The courtyard fell into a trembling silence as Ibrahim faced the assembled battalion, his voice rising above the smoke and broken stone like a verdict carved into the sky. He looked at the young men in uniform, boys with dust on their boots and fear in their eyes, boys who had signed up to defend their mothers and sisters, not to be used as disposable currency in a foreign puppet master's game. "Look at me," he shouted, dragging the disgraced general by his collar like a discarded mask. "You must decide, will you follow the coward who hid underground while you bled upstairs? Or will you stand with the brother who stood in front of bullets meant for you?" As words struck deeper than any rifle shot. For a heartbeat, the world held its breath. Then the rifles began dropping, first one, then three. Then the entire front line lowering their weapons like a tide surrendering to gravity. A tank turret groaned as it swung away from the palace steps and locked onto the convoy of black SUVs. The mercenaries finally understood the tide had turned. They scrambled into their vehicles, engines screaming, fleeing the courtyard like rats abandoning a ship set aflame. What ended the coup wasn't the firefight, nor the traps, nor even the steam-filled ambush in the basement. It was the sight of truth made public, illuminated in the morning sun. By nightfall, the palace had settled into a bruised quiet. Glass was swept into neat piles, burn marks were covered with tops, the traitors sat behind steel doors. Ibrahim watched the news roll across a dozen screens, anchors calling the day a miracle, foreign correspondents scrambling to rewrite their prepared obituaries. Caleb stood in the doorway, hands behind his back, awaiting judgment that weighed heavier than any chains. "I'm ready for my sentence, sir," he whispered. "I know what I did. I won't run from the wall." Ibrahim studied him for a long moment, then spoke without softness. "You deserve the wall. But today, you also chose the right side." He tossed Caleb a small dented badge, the same one he had ripped from his chest hours earlier. Caleb caught it with trembling hands. "You don't get the privilege of dying," Ibrahim said. "You will live, and every sunrise, you will earn the air you breathe." Caleb saluted, tears blurring his vision, and returned to his post. Ibrahim walked to the window, staring out at the capital, its lights shimmering like 1,000 small promises that it somehow survived the storm. Moza joined him quietly. "They'll return," he warned. "Not the mercenaries, the ones in suits, the ones pretending to be allies. They won't stop." Ibrahim rested his hand on the cold window, feeling the pulse of his nation against his palm. "I know," he whispered, a tired but dangerous smile creeping across his face. "Let them come. The lions are awake now." And in that stillness, Ibrahim understood that the hardest battles were never fought on open fields but in the rooms, where trust lived and died on tonight. Trust had survived by a thread, but it had survived. If this scene hit you like a punch to the chest, if you felt the tension, the betrayal, the rise, the roar, then don't let the story stop here. Stories like this grow only when readers like you breathe fire into them. Share this chapter with someone who loves high-stakes political thrillers, someone who thrives on twists, someone who believes heroes aren't born, they're cornered and forced to rise. Comment your favorite moment, the quote that punched you, the twist that froze your blood, or the symbol that stayed with you. And if you want more scenes where loyalty is tested, where courage breaks the dark, where a single voice can turn an entire army, stay connected. Follow the journey, be part of it. The next chapter isn't just written, it's waiting for the kind of reader who doesn't blink when the world burns. That reader is you.